change instantly on a dime. The presupposition of what you think life is, who you think you are, and what you think your value is actually based on a matrix, an information highway that can be broken down further into numbers, number sets, subsets, systems. And this is what an entered apprentice is. You are entered into the world. You are entered into the computational data set. And this is what leads people toward determinism. And ultimately, when you reach a point of determinism and you feel like everything is futile, that's the first step in the process of soul degradation. If everything is just predetermined and you begin to witness the parallel lines in your life, and you begin to, as an entered apprentice, try and create an echo effect, right? You want to know how far you extend, how much you can modify, what those modifications and behavioral deviations equal. And pretty soon you're standing for something that is foreign to you. You're carrying a torch, a flag, you're campaigning for something, and your entire life is now consumed by an ideology that you otherwise knew nothing about as a child, but some are inducted earlier. Some are told mind-bending information. It's like that movie Inception. It's just one thought. Knowing human psychology, knowing human behavior, because we are all in these sin suits together. They're crafted this way. They're made of the 5, the pentagram. The numbers 5, 9, 11, 22, 23, and of course 13. I mean, all numbers have their relevance and they can all be broken down into base codes. But it's energy generation. That's what's happening here. So there's a meaning, an intent, a purpose, but then there is a symbol that better correlates to how the energy moves, not only just in a dynamic sense, but in a seemingly static sense. Because if you can parlay, relay, delay the energy, and this is what neurolinguistic programming is all about, if you can, so a really good example of this seems off topic, but it's directly related to this. It's how I woke up this morning. Well, it wasn't the morning. I stayed up all night because if you watched my live stream yesterday, you'll know that I had like a bunch of tea, sweet tea yesterday. And didn't have any fresh water until today. So I was even making my rice with sweet tea. It's a long story, but that was what I ended up with. And I was so amped up on sugar and caffeine that I stayed up all night and didn't get to sleep until like early in the morning. It wasn't even that early. Crashed out for 4 or 5 hours, got up, and I'm trying to make a day out of it. And that's what I start to do as I walk. I go into this pace walking because I know the environment. I've done this for the past 2.5, 3 years. I've walked, I mean, just in the coming months, I'll have walked a couple thousand miles, but it's well over 1,500 miles that I charted. It's not odd. It's not boring. I'm probably doing more than you are. And that's the whole point to this, is that when you sit back in judgment, you have to ask, who's judging? Are you really judging other people from a basis where you can say, like most people on YouTube are hiding behind 1 subscriber, 2 subscribers. It's a tertiary channel or a secondary channel. They think they're real smart because they think that they've finally gotten away with something where they can say these sardonic, rude remarks, but they don't realize the energy follows them around and it comes back and bites them. And so you can really tell inexperienced and young people by the things that they say. But that's not always true. Sometimes karma follows people along. And they have a wisdom that follows with them, but it's extremely rare. Just like old people, there's plenty of old people who are very ignorant. Just because they have gray hair doesn't mean they know jack shit. But chances are, through a collective, if they still have 2 wits about them, and they have some sort of personal constitution that drives them, keeps them going. Sometimes people, like my uncle who passed away, that was unexpected, a couple of months ago now. And I got this TRX, and I've talked about this suspension trainer that came back to me. I wasn't going to buy another one. My life is pretty much over. Worse than over. Like, I've also had insult to injury, and then erasure was attempted several times on my person. So why I'm still here, why I'm even addressing these issues, why I even bother, why I campaign to keep esoteric principles of light.blogspot.com going, why I post up there year after year, I have no idea. On a physical sense. If you were to ask me the meaning of it, oh, I could go on, and that's what it's all about. So there's a point where everything has to have meaning, and you can't erase the golden mean, the phi or the 5 Fibonacci sequence. Everything leads back to this. Just because you discuss an idea in a whimsical way, just because you heard about it in Da Vinci Code or wherever the fuck you picked up on it, it doesn't mean you understand the intricacy. So what I was getting into is I was watching Eek Acres, where this guy Kevin and his wife Bridget are very nice people, very down to earth, good kin, good homebody sort of people, you know. And really refreshing to watch his channel, and he doesn't mean to, but every now and then he comes off braggy. He's had a hard life, you know. He's earned his scraps. He has scrapes and scraps. But he was talking about on this trip, a family reunion with his wife, his now wife Bridget, into Iowa, which I have a lot of roots in. But I digress. He noticed that there was a lot of trucks on the road, and he syllogistically assumed, and this isn't a put down to him, it's just, you know, what the eye sees about the supply chain, and what the assumption that's made that, wow, there's a lot of trucks. You're on a major highway, right, of transport in the middle of the day, at a certain time of the day. Of course, it's going to seem like everything is fine and dandy and that the supply chain, there's nothing wrong with it. But when you get into the intricate aspects of what those trucks are doing, what they're hauling, how efficient they're working, right? If it's feeding in, just like what he'll end up finding now that he's making $100,000 a year and growing off his YouTube channel, and doesn't really have to make much effort at this point. And a big reason why I subscribed to him, like a lot of people did, is because he's recently had a kidney removed. from a cancer, not just a scare, but he had to have cancer removed. And he's talking about pissing out blood. And, there's a human quality when you see, do I like this person? Which should be irrelevant, right? It should not be relevant at all to say, do I like this person? Do I find this person worthy? Now you're the arbiter of life and you're determining what the quality of life is. And, there's plenty of ugly animals out there that don't aesthetically meet the pleasing eye of us, the assumable beholder. Just had to tie my shoe. But look, the thing about it is that there's a certain syllogism that we fall into that isn't us, and that you have to define who you are, and even more so, you have to create who you are. And if people understood that there aren't days that you can sort of lackadaisically just go about this gadabout, meandering, I don't know. Have you ever felt bored? How the fuck is it that you ever felt bored, or that I've felt bored? It's like we must be so far off track. If the whole idea to life is really to build up an identity and a soul, and you don't have one, you never know how many moments you have left. Well, it's like an eternal moment. You never know how many seconds you have left in life to really captivate that and make it count. Right? We don't know. So my ex-wife, who just not only sought out to destroy my life and really caused a lot of havoc in a lot of people's lives, and was so demanding with people, and one of those people that just, if you really know her, it's like you would walk away going, oh, that's a really toxic, crazy person, if you really saw who this person was. And then you saw the diabolical aspect to the way that she does things, the way she thinks. It's one of those things where you'd step back going, no way is she thinking that way. And then she validates it to you with this sort of sinister smile, right? And that's not just an ex-wife story. This is a long-running history, right? And I'm not saying I'm perfect. In fact, I know every which way that I'm fucked up. But she just recently had a really bad health scare. And when things actually happen and you have kids that you love, the first thing that I was doing is I was hugging my boys, because I understand the universal mother. I don't have a quote unquote good mother or a good relationship with my mother, but I understand the cosmic reality. Like when I'm watching a program or I see a really touching moment, an enduring moment, I understand that from a universal perspective. And if you lose that, you're losing that, what we would call a human quality, but we find that that's not really a human quality. That's a quality of consciousness. In fact, it could be described more strictly as qualia, or even quanta. What quantizes you, what quantifies you, the enjoyment, the pleasure, and the quality of your life and your experience. You can get into other terms that are highbrow terms that people like to throw around, very literate people like Jason Risa Giorgiani. When you get into Welt, Welt-Built, Weltanschauung Krieg, you get into a worldview, a world quality, and even like a parallax view of life and experience. And you can even go further into phenomenon and noumenon. These are just fancy terms that lead us in a direction that really remove us through the application of nomenclature and etymology, lead us toward, oh, they wouldn't understand. So we're going to have this exclusive communication together, right? Only we in this Ivy League school get it, right? And then when you begin to understand it, you're like these oral traditions, these parables, these stories that are told, they're saying the same thing. You're saying that they're unsophisticated people, but they're thinking on a multifarious scale where they have identified a symbol, and these symbols are, again, they're used all around the world throughout different eras, different times. They're found in cave paintings. It's these reoccurring 30 to 30, I'm going to say 33 to, I think 30 to 34 symbols. If you want to look it up, it's very interesting. But of course, that phi swirl, that swirl is always there. And even more so, this is linked heavily in, if you follow the Underclass podcast with Austin Picard, right? And the Undead that he does with Jose. He just had a really interesting interview with the guy that goes by Donet, D-O-E, right? What you find is when they do these deep dives into the Delphi murders and other occult rituals, you will see these symbols come up. You will see runes come up, right? Because runes are an interpretation of these symbols that are used through tribal traditions, and very little changes as far as the use of these symbols and the exchange over long, vast periods of time, to where you would begin to posit that perhaps this is the language model, the base language model, that our alphabet, the English language, right? Because my son asked me a question the other day concerning finances. He was asking me, well, do all countries have that symbol, like the eye and, you know, all these occult connections? And I go, they don't need to. Why do you think that all of this is taking place, all these arms and all these links back to Operation Gladio, the Knights of Malta, the Vatican, all of these, and the whole Manly P. Hall conceptualization of this new Atlantis and what's going on with the Epstein trials, right? And that's something I really have to throw out there so that I don't lose my thought, is that, do you understand how they see us and how they regard us? Maybe you don't. That they consider us not only the profane, but when George Bush Jr. was talking about terrorists, you really need to listen carefully, because they're talking to one another. They're not addressing us. We already signed off our rights. We are already dead. Okay? And that's why there's this fascination with the skull and bones, 322. Yeah, I highly urge you to go on the Underclass podcast and look at his most recent interview. He just posted it up like an hour ago, just fresh off the track today. But the point that I'm trying to make is a very important one, and that is, it's a performance that they're doing out in the open. It's a rejection. So when you think, oh, this is a terrible person, Epstein's a terrible person, look back at Oliver North, look back at Bill Clinton, look back at how the tables were turned, and they're little deviations that people don't pay attention to because they're going off to work to be slaves to the banking system, never getting ahead, right? And living up to the assumption of what they think about you in the first place, sacrificing you, right? Sacrificing us all, the slave class. But what's happening is we are officially rejecting them, okay? They were merely going about the act of being an upstanding master class. Like when you look at the Masons and you look at the degrees, they were doing their job, right? They were living and performing according to these occult ritual principal methodologies. They were doing everything correctly. Epstein was doing everything correct to the cult. Bill Clinton did it down to the T. There was nothing to waste. There were no errors. Everything that they did, they were supposed to do, and they were supposed to be rejected, like the cornerstone rejected, like Hiram Abiff, right? They're going through the ritual where you're not one of us. You're a criminal. We're going to put you on trial. We're going to put you, trial by fire, right? You're removed, you're canceled, right? And when these people in these occult organizations go through this, they are now inducted, right? This is very similar when you look at Albert Pike dying really penniless, along with Karl Marx and other people. When you look at George Washington and the suspicious circumstances of how these people just die, right? And their high level affiliation, the high level degree. So my family was affiliated to this and was part and parcel to this, but I didn't have any knowledge of my family history. I had to dig into this myself and find out who Philip Marsteller was, and George Marsteller, two pallbearers at George Washington's funeral. One was a Mason, one was not, right? And we're all related because there were only 4 Marstellers that came to what would be the States, but the 13 original colonies from Pfungstadt, Germany, based on a war that had been going on for 100 years. And guess what? It was all about witchcraft. So there are ways to create for the profane things that they can blow up into hyperbole and call spiritualism. They can call it craft. But I've never seen anything that couldn't be described honestly, all the way down to, like, when you dissect the scriptures, Jesus didn't turn, that never happened. He never turned water into wine. He never served the multitudes. None of that stuff ever happened, right? But when you look at it, and you look at even walking on water, all of those things could be done today with technology. You would just have to lay out, and you couldn't talk this freely about technology and go, oh yeah, of course. I mean, that's goes without saying. 30 years ago, if you were to say that, people would go, oh, that would have to be, I don't even know how you would do that. And it's how people approach it, right? And now that we've broken down the codified number system and we know more about physics, more about the planes of motion and the interaction, strong, weak nuclear forces, electromagnetism, and a whole lot more, right? A whole lot more. Those things are not far-fetched at all. In fact, one would say that this has already existed. You know, they want to throw us on these false trails with anti-gravitics and so forth. But the main point that I was trying to make, and the most pressing and important aspect, is that they are doing acts, just going about like David Berkowitz. Why did George Bush Jr. pardon him from being executed, right? Because David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, went through everything he was supposed to do. He listened to the voice, he followed the voice, he aligned himself with the rituals, and he did it. He said, in all the actions, and you would say, wow, this is crazy, you know? Like Ed Edwards on the game show, right? Like Alcala on the game show. Do you think it was just a coincidence and hubris that they ended up on a game show? They were out there in public display, you know, just like John Wayne Gacy, right? I mean, how much more Masonic can you get than that guy? And he was looking at the goy, you and I, everyone around us, right? And if we are not practicing and taking these oaths and rejoining, no matter what bloodline we come from, every single generation the family has to re-exhibit themselves, right? Like the Society of the Cincinnati. I actually have, I could actually apply for the Society of the Cincinnati. I have family lineage that fought that meet all the prerequisites, right? And I'm sure that there is a Marsteller that's representing the family line. But when you begin to look at what a family line really is, it's not the family line outside the order. It's not the family line outside the process, as in the process church. It's when you are initiated. You have to choose with your eyes wide shut or your eyes wide open, however you want to look at it, because you can work covertly or you can work overtly. Rudolf Steiner talked about this, and it is mentioned with Jacques Vallée. That's not exactly true what the suggestions are about the invisible college. All of us know this. Autodidactic learning, auto writing, those wouldn't even be terms that are synonymous, or remote viewing. It would be scoffed at and laughed at. But the fact that you can, or Nikolai Tesla putting, a pencil or a pen and a paper next to himself on his end table every single night when he's going to sleep, and knowing that he's going to wake up with some juicy shit, and it might even be written in languages that he doesn't even read and write, and that he has to fucking decipher the next morning. This shit's happening left and right. Right? So this conceptualization, these ideas, and this connection, where you have to begin the first aspect of the codified system, this is what ritual is based on. This is what the 5 points are based on. The 5 digits on your hand, the 5 points to the pentagram, the fact that the top of the inverted pentagram is an altar, right? And then you have people like Albert Bender, that like, what was his face? Nathaniel Gillis. Kind of a confabulated, like he basically says the same thing interview in, interview out. He's not that engaging, but he brings up some really good points. But if you really wanted to get the meat of the topics that he's talking about, you would go toward Steve Mira, Barry Fitzgerald, who have a lot of field research knowledge. So what they began to do is so Steve Mira actually started working in the paranormal field, where he would go to like these hotels that were fucking haunted, and people would pay him, and he would actually get footage and use the best technology that you could use at those times, and actually try to figure out how we're gonna combat this and make this place unhaunted, or working in the field, like no bullshit kind of thing, right? And then what he started to find is that there was this intersection with the paranormal, where there really was no difference between this sort of demonic or angelic, the stories, the terminologies are all different, or ufology, and so he's a really engaging, interesting person to listen to. But the reason I bring him up is because he was asked, well, do these entities flee in Jesus' name? And he, point blank, when these people who have all this field experience, years and years, and have been paid well by large organizations, big hotel names, to do this type of work on the down low, he'll tell you no. No. Like, in fact, they'll do things that Nathaniel Gillis talks about, and I don't know if this is directly taken from Steve Mira and Barry Fitzgerald, Mira, M-E-R-A, and that's an interesting play on the name, right? There are no coincidences, right? But that even holy water, when it was used at certain times through these exorcisms, they would just play with the holy water, like to where I think there was this one depiction where like holy water would disappear and reappear, and it's just like, these are the terms that you're establishing. This is the guidelines, like the Ouija board. Okay, this is the science that you're communicating with us on. Let's take a look at it from the other side. It's kind of like scrying, right? From the other side, from the liminal zone. And it's allowing you to say, okay, now you're going to go into an operational conjecture between something that we know you can't see us. We know how you're put together. We know you can barely even sense us. Let's play a game, right? And so these dicyanine or diacinine glasses that Cliff High's father spoke about and had direct experience with it are very interesting to look into. And they became all the rage, and people thought they were buying them, but you can't buy the originals. You can't buy the infrared versions of these. In fact, they made it nearly impossible, right? But the original night vision goggles that the military was trying to use in Vietnam, Cliff High will tell you all about his father and his father's experience. It's crazy. I even did a video about that. And they were essentially seeing these flying demons, looking at them in great detail, gesturing, to where in this one helicopter, these motherfuckers this gunner just started firing, right? And then the helicopter pilot started to fly with erratic behavior, and they were like, what the fuck's going on? You're shooting at us. We're going to have to take you down. What the fuck's going on, you know? The helicopter that Cliff High's father was in. And they were like, we're seeing shit. Like, that's my son. So it kind of gets rhetorical, but it's important to address this. But I'm going to call my son. I'm going to keep walking. Breathing heavy, having kind of a difficult day, but I'm living up to my part. I'm doing it. I'm walking the walk. If I can push it out, I will train today. I've been training for days. I've been walking for days on end. I switched over to rice and chicken, and I'm 4 days in on the rice and chicken diet. And, you know, I might end up doing this type of sugar diet sort of experience for a little while yet. Mark Bell was talking about, what was his name? Pina, the bodybuilder who died some years back, the 5%. He was showing a clip where he was talking about it, and he's like, I couldn't function, you know, like when you're eating, it's too complex when you're eating chicken and taking your rice in, because you have the really complex sugar, starch, glucose molecules there, right? And then you have the protein. And so what he was doing, he did this for like over a month. Rich Pina. He said he had been eating something like 10 cups of rice a day during the daytime, and then he wouldn't have any protein until the nighttime, because otherwise he just couldn't train. And what he found was he would even turn these into like shakes and stuff just so he could get it down and get the energy. But that he was only doing something like 80 grams of protein and maintaining that massive physique, you know, at the same time. So that may be something that I look into, because it really is very difficult. Even though it's tasty, it bogs you down. You go into it, you can feel your liver straining. You can feel yourself like digesting the food, and it really like alters the energy that you have for the day. So I'm thinking about modifying this if I'm going to stay on it longer term, taking in maybe a little more sugars throughout the day, just like fruits and so forth, and combining that in with the rice, and then just avoiding protein altogether until the evening time.